In the late 1870s, a curious journalist from Hays County rode into Dodge City to write a column about the town. He wrote, "After a long day's ride in the scorching sun, I arrived in Dodge City. Dodge is the Deadwood of Kansas. Her incorporate limits are the rendezvous of all the unemployed scallywags in 7 states. Her principal business is polygamy without the sanction of religion. Her code of morals is the honor of thieves, and decency she knows not. The employment of many citizens is gambling. Her virtue is prostitution, and her beverage is whiskey. Her rowdyism has taken a most aggravated form, and was it not for the most stringent of ordinances, some of which are unconstitutional, and a fair attempt to enforce them, the town would be suddenly depopulated." An employee at the Dodge City Daily Globe sat down to reply to this furious journalist. He wrote, "We think this correspondent had a sour stomach when he portrayed the wickedness of our city, but we must expect it unless we ourselves try to improve the present condition of things. There is not a more peaceful, well-regulated, and orderly community in the western country." As the employee continued to write his reply, his young assistant entered his office to say that somebody wanted to see him. The employee stopped writing. He took his bowie knife between his teeth, put a Colt's new pattern 6-shooter pistol on his desk in front of him, and then said to his assistant, "Jim, get out another coffin, a plain one this time, and let the critter come in." Another widely circulated anecdote depicted the immorality of Dodge City. A drunken cowboy got on a train about 30 miles from Dodge. When the conductor asked his destination in order to compute his fare, the cowboy drunkenly stated, "I want to go to hell." The conductor replied, "All right, give me $1 and get off at Dodge." This is life in Dodge City, known to Americans at the time as the wickedest town in America. How did this frontier outpost garner its evil reputation? Established in 1872 on the western edge of the military reservation known as Fort Dodge, it originally served as a depot to aid in the construction of the Santa Fe Railroad. Farmers refused to settle there, blaming the dry climate incapable of producing profitable crops. As a result, the outpost would struggle to grow into a civilized town. Instead, it was left sitting in a vast plain of grass that was the home to Indians, millions of buffalo, a few soldiers trying to maintain the peace, and buffalo hunters killing millions of bison needing a place to sell their hides, buy supplies, and blow off some steam. To serve these buffalo hunters, the cowboys driving cattle north from Texas to link up with the railroad, as well as the soldiers at Fort Dodge, merchants moved to the new town, along with gamblers, saloon keepers, and prostitutes. Many businessmen in Dodge realized that this wicked reputation was to their advantage. Although the town came into fruition in 1872, it did not receive status as a city until November of 1875. In the meantime, the town had no town marshal or policeman. With no law officers to keep the peace, no courts to try the unlawful, and no jail to confine the condemned, each citizen was responsible for himself. This prevailing wind of chaos would terrorize Dodge City for decades to come. In the first year of its existence, 14 men were shot and killed in Dodge City. They had to be buried somewhere. The site chosen was a desolate hill to the west of town. When a cowboy, gambler, buffalo hunter, or transient died, he was placed in a hastily constructed pine box, carried by wagon to the edge of town, and buried in a grave with a crude wooden cross for a tombstone. Such was the final resting place of the person without friends, money, home, and on occasion, name. Because so many of these people died with their boots on, the cemetery was called Boot Hill. As violence continued to mount and Boot Hill claimed more and more tenants, town officials desperately sought relief. To put an end to the carnage, town officials imported the best gunmen in the country to Dodge City. For a while, these men seemed to only add to the slaughter as they used their own weapons to settle quarrels, but eventually the rowdy cowboy, who got his courage from liquor, realized the futility of opposing these professional gunmen, and only then did Dodge City begin to settle down. In 1875, after the city held official elections for city positions, a formidable team of lawmen were assembled. 25-year-old buffalo hunter Ed Masterson was appointed assistant marshal in 1877. His younger and soon-to-be more famous brother, Bat Masterson, settled in Dodge City months later and joined Ed as a marshal. The youngest brother, James Masterson, followed suit as well. He joined his oldest brothers as a lawman and moonlighted as co-owner of the Lady Gay Dance Hall and Saloon. Finally joining the trio of brothers was Wyatt Earp. For months the four maintained order in Dodge City, keeping all facets of criminals at bay without ever having to fire a gun. Instead, they relied on pistol-whipping foes by clubbing them on the back of the head with the butts of their revolvers. However, on the night of April 9th, 1878, the group of lawmen would pay a price for the relative peace they established in the town. At about 10 p.m., shots rang out at one of the saloons on the infamous south side of the railroad tracks. The south side was notorious for violence because men were allowed to possess firearms, while they were prohibited north of the train tracks. Ed Masterson, the oldest brother, and a policeman named Nat Haywood arrived on the scene to find 6 cowboys just off the trail, drunk and firing their pistols. Masterson disarmed one of the cowboys, Jack Wagner, the drunkest and most outspoken of them. Without his revolver, Wagner retreated into the saloon and returned outside with another pistol. Again, Masterson went to disarm Wagner, and a fight ensued. During the fight, Wagner managed to pull out a pistol and shoot Masterson in the stomach. By this time, Bat Masterson, now sheriff of Dodge City, heard the shooting and arrived at the scene. Wagner and the rest of the drunks retreated. As they retreated, Bat Masterson and his wounded brother Ed drew their revolvers and managed to hit Wagner and his cohort A.M. Walker. Wagner would die from his wounds 20 hours later, and Walker, despite being hit in the lungs, would survive. Unfortunately for Ed Masterson, he stumbled into the saloon and died hours later. In 1881, new city elections were held. The Masterson brothers, previously monopolizing all law enforcement positions in the city, were ousted. Earp and Bat Masterson departed for Tombstone, while James stayed behind to run the Lady Gay Saloon. The new mayor, A.B. Webster, sought to immediately end the growing corruption. On April 7, 1881, signs posted around Dodge City read, "To all whom it may concern, all thieves, thugs, confidence men, and persons without visible means of income will take notice that the ordinance enacted for their special benefit will be rigorously enforced on and after tomorrow." After years of consistent violence, Dodge City was finally forced to grow up after the governor of Kansas, George W. Glick, threatened to send 2 companies of National Guardsmen into Dodge City. The threat worked. By 1883, the city had established an ordinance that forced all businesses to close on Sunday, although the post office, drugstore, and the butcher shop could do business for 1 hour. Another ordinance banned music and singing in dance halls and saloons. By 1885, the boom period was ending, and with it the gunfighting, gambling, prostitution, and fist-fighting that had characterized Dodge City. Several factors in combination forced the city to become what several people had been demanding for years: civilized.